Right, so I've been thinking about Gameverse a lot recently. So much so, in fact, that when Glitch posted about the amazing Digital Circus releasing during my first draft of this script, I was genuinely surprised that it was coming out so soon. And a lot of people are probably wondering why this video isn't me talking about the finale, but I'll go over that later. For now, let me explain why this show has been playing on my mind so much recently. See, the entirety of the Gameverse plot, the core driver of this show, is Kit and Kaboodle going to different worlds to stop the win condition from being met. That is perfectly fine for the RPG-like settings that all of the characters have been in so far. Kit and Flappers are both clear-cut RPG protagonists, even if their games are for wildly different age ranges. And Gobbles, though in an education-style game, is still on a quest to save the letters from this caveman. But this is the Gameoverse, an entire universe of different games, so surely they can't all just be RPGs. That would be an insult to gaming as a whole. And Ross has said something about this, saying that there will be other game types and that we will need to wait and see how their worlds are constructed. The internet, as you should well know, however, doesn't have a great deal of patience, so people have made stories and art placing these characters into lots of real-life games, a good deal of which keep appearing on my Instagram feed. So today, we're going to be extending these hypotheticals by taking a look at what you guys think would be the hardest and easiest real-life games for our dynamic duo to save. But as it would physically pain me to not critique something in a video, I will be judging your opinions and telling you if they're valid or rubbish. Let's get into it, starting with the hardest games. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream the game. This is actually a perfect illustration of a point I brought up in my review. They're going to die to complete the game regardless, so it's either perpetual suffering or death. The story of this game tells us what the protagonist would rather have. Doom. Any of the more modern ones would be absolutely horrific because he just doesn't die, but the original could be possible if you found a way to coordinate the demons properly. While the Doom Slayer is pretty much a god who exists purely for slaughter, Doom Guy is just a marine. Now, a marine with a lot of dedication to do a job is a very scary thing, but he is only human, and humans die a lot. Hollow Knight. This one I disagree with because there are a ton of opportunities for our pair to influence NPCs into not helping the knight. The Snail Shaman would be very open to just not giving the knight a spell, and while Fireborn can get into Green Path without it, the average player of the game, which the protagonist's skill is probably built around, can't. The Coffin of Andy and Lele. This one comes down to an issue with figuring out who the protagonists are. Yes, Andy and Ashley are the main characters, but I wouldn't exactly call them protagonists. And even then, can't you stop them by just calling the police and taking the lot of them to a psych ward? I'm not all that interested in the Genshin comment here because it's an RPG, just stop them from killing all the bosses. No, I'm more interested in the Balatro comment underneath. Games like this really don't have a protagonist. The protagonist is the person behind the screen who doesn't have a physical manifestation. On top of that, what would this world even look like? It's entirely confined within a poker table. But if somehow this world was represented in Gameverse, it would be easy to just ask the dealer to keep putting Magic 8 Ball in the shop. Danganronpa. This one is here purely for you, Chiron. I know you still watch these videos. Given how well trying to convince these guys not to murder each other goes in the games themselves, I don't think an angry lunchbox telling them the same thing would really change the outcome here. So unless Kit gets her Abraham Lincoln on, this world is definitely screwed. DDLC. Given Kaboodle is a master engineer here, I reckon he would have a pretty good amount of coding experience. Enough at least to help Monica encrypt her files and prevent them from being deleted off the computer without also deleting a key part of the game. Unlike a lot of things which are more just band-aids, DDLC is probably a game that could go forever without being beaten if done properly. The amazing Digital Circus. I honestly expected this answer to be much higher up given the former Glitch fanbase that has watched this show and my other videos, but the question here is, what is the win condition of this game? Completing Kane's adventures are wins, yes, but that's more like completing one quest. The AI produces infinite new adventures until the end of time, so how could you ever beat it? And no, supertasking the adventures is not an option. A rather interesting sample here. Most of these games tend to eventually force themselves to some sort of conclusion regardless of what happens, so there's just nothing to be done by anyone to alter the outcome. And I will pause here to clear something up, because out of the 1,000 1,000 odd comments I got on my 2 posts about this idea, at least half of the ideas suggested breaking the rules of the Gameverse. While no ending condition has been met within a game, characters who are not from that world cannot damage or kill anything or anyone within it. The pilot actually tries to beat this over the viewer's head. Kaboodle says it, we see it occurring when Kit punches the ground, and once the game is completed, Fold has to break through that barrier to punch flappers. Characters from outside of the game world also can't mention the Gameverse to characters still in it, otherwise the game world starts scanning for the anomaly and presumably deletes it from existence. These 2 rules mean that Kit and Kaboodle need to act as though they are passive NPCs in whichever world they go to. They can't fight anyone, they can't kill anything, and they can't destroy required items or structures. They need to use their words, and only their words. Alright, now that that's cleared up and a lot of people understand why their comment won't be featured in this video, let's take a look at the other side of the equation. What are the easiest games for them to save? Factorio, because the end condition is launching a rocket into space. Mission 911, this is a fantastic argument that I, and probably most people, didn't think about. If the final condition of a game is getting off of the world, does that also mean they're successfully getting off of the game world too? Yes, the world itself is destroyed, but the characters, the thing we actually care about here, would be safe. Casual games like Candy Crush and Animal Crossing. Casual games do appear to be safe havens in the Gameverse, and there is a theory going around that the Farcade base camps and headquarters are set up on these worlds, with the characters from them just being kept in the dark as to what they're for. I'd be careful about including Candy Crush on that list, however. Getting over it with Bennett Foddy. This game has been out for like a decade now, and I'm still yet to see someone pick it up and beat it without throwing things across the room. Plenty of these B-type rage games would be pretty easy to save, however it does require some psychological manipulation on Kit and Kaboodle's part to get the protagonist to give up before they eventually get over the mountain. From Software games fall into this same category of just being really difficult, so the average person can't beat them. The main problem here is just trying to get the protagonist to give up, since they can respawn an endless number of times, but that is certainly achievable. The FNAF titles. There is actually a fantastic illustration that sums up all of these games perfectly. The last nights of every FNAF game, aside from potentially Sister Location and Security Breach, require an understanding of the movement patterns for all the different animatronics. If Kit and Kaboodle can convince the animatronics to behave more randomly, these games would be almost impossible. Among Us. Now this brings up yet another question regarding the rules of this show. How exactly do multiplayer games work? Specifically, competitive multiplayer games, because they almost always result in a winner regardless of what happens, but they're also the kind of game that you play over and over again on the same map. Now, some of these games have a morally good and bad side, like Among Us, where you can theoretically just help the imposters, but for something like TF2, that game would be toast in 15 minutes. And finally, we need to talk about the big one. The game mentioned more than any other in both of these posts. The most popular game of all time. How difficult is it to stop someone from beating Minecraft? Taking the game as it is now in 2026, you would actually require a syntax intervention for pretty much anyone to beat this game. And before we start arguing, I consider defeating the Ender Dragon to be beating the game. Yes, you can do lots of stuff afterwards, there's a whole dimension to deal with afterwards, but the Ender Dragon dying causes the rolling text, so I say that's the end of the game. Mojang did a pretty good job signposting the Nether with the ruined portals, but since we don't yet have an end update, the only way the player would find out about it is by randomly stumbling across a stronghold, which is very unlikely. Remember, the in-game character has no knowledge outside of what is readily present in the game itself, so they would have no way of knowing that Ender Dragon even existed. So Minecraft goes on the easy list as long as the game stays in its natural state. And those are some of the hardest and easiest games for Kit and Kaboodle to defend against, suggested by you guys and reviewed by a very unhelpful individual. But that does now mean we need to sit down and have a serious chat about the amazing Digital Circus. By the time you're watching this video, the Amazing Digital Circus finale has been out for 2 days, and I have already seen it. Therefore, I am not scared of reading the comments of this video. That being said, I still have my objections to the time gap between the theatrical and YouTube releases, so out of principle, there will be zero spoiler content on this channel up until after the YouTube premiere, at which point I will doubtlessly have a lot to talk about. But I will still be making content about Gameverse that, despite everyone's opinion, I do quite like, and content about other indie-related things, which is going to be open to all of you guys. Notably, the comment section will remain open. I think you can see where this is going. So, if at any point throughout the next 2 weeks I see a true Digital Circus spoiler on this channel, the account that made it will be permanently muted, because nobody has the right to ruin this piece of media that we've all collectively been enjoying for the last 3 years to anyone else who couldn't see it because of location or financial difficulties. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, enjoy the movie, and have a good one.